Brothers and sisters, welcome to the show. And this show is special to me because I'm happen to be an immigrant. And we had Maxime Bernier here on the show who said, and we tend to agree with him, that Canada doesn't necessarily have a housing problem that we all experience. Rent not triple. Rent is 93% higher than it was. And, mortgage payments are triple for average mortgage payer.
With regards to what Maxime Bernier said, yes, the Mighty Max just telling the truth, okay? Which a lot of the present-day politicians in power right now, they don't want the truth to get out there. They're always pointing the finger and blaming somebody else or somewhere else for the predicament that was engineered and they put us in. So, no. And with regards to immigration, we need immigration. The population without the immigration would be diminishing exponentially, and that's one of the worst things one can imagine for a local economy of a country. So last year in Canada, we brought in 1.15 million new immigrants into Canada. Bravo. Welcome, everybody.
Well, here help us to discuss this timely topic is all the way from land of Israel, right? And Yanai, Gore, how you doing, my friend? I mean, you're a world traveler. You've been all over the place. You've done business with many of nations, and you understand the world from many different sides of it, specifically immigration. And living in Israel, Israel has its own significant immigration tendencies. We can discuss it as well. But in your opinion, because you know Canada really well, and specifically in terms of immigration, what is your opinion on Maxime Bernier's statement that Canada doesn't have a housing problem, Canada has an immigration problem?
Canada has a lot of problems, including a housing problem and an immigration problem, and a whole bunch of other hosts of problems that if we get to today, your show will be about 5 hours long.
Well, okay, so not to put you on the spot, that happened just a few days ago, and we didn't discuss this. I mean, we talked pre-show about the things that we're possibly going to talk about on this show, but I'm going to put you on the spot. This whole Nazi debacle, or they call it Nazi Gate, that happened in the parliament here, and Justin issued an apology to Canadians, to Israel, to Ukrainians, to the Jewish population of Canada and the world in general. First of all, how was this perceived and taken by the Israelis, specifically in Israel? And what is your personal opinion on that debacle?
Well, Israel is divided into two, actually, on this. The man on the street doesn't know about it, doesn't care about it, not touching his day or night. If you're talking about politicians, it's their job to be outraged. So, shockingly enough, they are outraged. As for me personally, I think it was just sloppy work. Somebody was just lazy. They literally just probably Googled some Ukrainian war hero from the past without doing any kind of background checks. And they just plucked the first one in, cynically using them to advance their own point in Ukraine right now. That's my opinion.
Well, and that seems to be actually an excuse, an explanation for thing that did happen. My thing is, if you can vet such a simple process as not bringing a Nazi to the parliament, how can you, account for all other issues that happening in the Canadian government, specifically maybe how can they account for the dollar amounts that go to Ukrainian war efforts, for example, if they can't even vet the Nazi in the parliament type of thing? So it's a whole issue in itself. But let's get back.
You're not wrong. It is disconcerting, but I'll tell you this. There's a very famous saying that applies here. Never assume malice when stupidity is more than enough.
The stupidity, is that how you want to describe your government? Well, my government specifically here in Canada. And it seems like Canada had its own stupidity, had plenty of stupid moments in the last few weeks, especially like the Indian thing, G20, the cocaine on the plane. At first, we thought the airplane broke, and we're like, how dare they, break the Canadian, prime minister's plane in India? And well, then later we realized that they actually found some coke on the plane, and that was the delay. How embarrassing is that? And then they bring the Nazi, and and then they have the million children, save the million children march in Ottawa, and the prime minister calls those people, hateful groups and all that stuff. And a lot of them were actually people of Jewish origin and Muslims and Christians all coming together. So this government of ours makes us look stupid in general on the world stage, so to speak. But this is still a great country. Don't get me wrong. Just because people that at the helm right now making us look stupid, it doesn't mean Canadians are stupid, or most of the Canadians are not stupid. And that's why we actually have a discussion here, because in the last few years, we see a dramatic drop in the birth rate. And that's not just me talking emotionally. It actually comes directly from Statistics Canada. And if you look at population growth, fewer babies born as Canada fertility rate hit record low in 2020, right? That's directly from the Statistics Canada. And if you go to websites like microtrends.net, Canada birth rate, which they track from 1950 to 2023, has dropped into a negative. So it's at the negative 0.75%. So how do we maintain the population? How do we keep the country growing? Is through immigration. Now, I'm all for immigration, because I happen to be an immigrant myself, and I benefit, and my family benefit a lot from coming to this country. And I believe I brought some value to this country and to this society as well. The countries that have, in my opinion, they have a controlled immigration are way better off. And you see, right now, there's a spat in European Union, specifically in Poland. The Polish leaders are saying, look what's happening in the rest of Europe, and specifically in relation to Poland. Poland has a more controlled immigration policies versus the rest of Europe. United States, the southern border is wide open, and the enormous amount of people that being bussed from the southern border. Even New York is liberal states that are sanctuary cities like New York City now screaming for help. But here in Canada, again, going back to Maxime Bernier's statement, saying that we are in trouble here, specifically Canadians cannot afford housing. And, he refers to immigration. What is your thought on that?
To be survivable, a birth rate of a country has to be 2.1 or higher. Because if every couple has 2 kids, you're not growing, but you're not shrinking. If you have 2.1, you're always constantly growing even a little bit. Canada's birth rate right now is 1.44, meaning every couple has about 1.5 kids, which is not even enough to replace the older people as they grow older. So immigration does cut into fill in the blanks, fill in the rest. In the US, the birth rate is almost 1.7, it's 1.68. And again, with the immigration from the south of the border, it's actually up to 2.2, which is barely enough to actually make up, but it is enough. So it actually keeps the US afloat, which is actually good for the economy. So if you're talking about controlled immigration, anything that puts you above the 2.1, but not so high as you would go off to 4, 5, or 6, then you're pretty much in a good place. Also, you would like to have, ideally, immigrants that can contribute to the economy, people who have professions that you need or are willing to work in professions that your population is not willing to work in, like manual labor, plumbing, things that work with your hands, which most Western countries have gotten too spoiled to actually do. So therefore, you have that. As for the housing crisis, that comes with a joint US-Canada policy that is both wrong and unfortunately not looked at enough, which is the complete disappearance of the mid-rise. Canada, like the US, has sky rises, and they have single apartment homes like little villas and cottages, but the mid-rises, the like semi-tall buildings have almost completely disappeared. Nobody builds them anymore. Nobody invests in them anymore. And they are the big solution. If you started building mid-rises rather than single or dual family homes, you would solve the housing crisis pretty rapidly by just making the cities a little more condensed and building neighborhoods around gardens rather than just building single homes, each with their own garden.
Okay, I now you brought up a whole bunch of different issues I want to address. So, in reference to Canadians don't want to do blue collar jobs, I don't think they. It's not that they don't want to do. They I think they've been brainwashed into, um, pursuing college educations to pursuing the jobs that actually don't exist, and now all of those jobs are being replaced by AI specifically. And in terms of the housing crisis, I think it's being steered like the same way we refer to China, for example, and all those ghost cities that's being built. There's a cynical thing behind it. Maybe even here in Montreal, we have places like Griffintown that resemble the new trend that's being pushed for things like World Economic Forum Agenda 2030, 15-minute cities, which actually requires high rises to fulfill that agenda. So there's maybe something more cynical at play, but again, that may be a whole different show on its own. Glenn, your opinion on the whole thing? The Canadians don't want to do blue collar jobs anymore.
Yeah, they want to do whatever is easy. That usually manifests in all the countries where the technologies are taking over. Obviously, it's human nature to do least amount as possible. And as technology is getting more and more advanced, the less physical work people do, the more they gravitate towards that type of job. But this also has a negative ramification on the individual's health, of course. You are given a body. You're a spiritual being having a human experience. The human experience is using this creation that was given to you, your body, and you have to, you have to do some physical, whether it be work or exercise, or that's another problem. So much of the population is very unhealthy right now because things are getting too physically easy and they think it's all mental. No, we're dual universe here. It is the mind and the body. You have to work both and diligently at both.
What do you think about that?
Well, again, if we ignore some charged language in there, which I'm going to ignore because I don't have nearly enough time to break down these concepts, I do agree with that concept. And I would say that we have a saying here, healthy mind and a healthy body. So I absolutely agree. People should do more.
Okay, so how do you address how do you decide okay, the philosophical question? Who are we to decide where humans can and cannot go? Like, who are we to decide? Like, okay, let's say I want to go to Florida. Well, I'm lucky I have a Canadian passport. I can cross the border without a visa. But let's say if I'm a resident of Canada, permanent resident, and I need a visa to go to United States, but I really want to go to the beach. I can't. Well, who is there to decide where cannot go? Is Earthlink as a human being, part member of the human race, right? So it's a philosophical question. Why are we divided by borders? Why are we divided by passports and birth certificates and all that? That's a philosophical question. And then it segues into the question: how do we decide what is a good immigration? Who do we bring? Which countries are we addressing? Like from which country do we open immigration to all countries? Do we open immigration to only particular segment of population, particular skills? Would it be engineers, blue collar work, etc. Whatever it is, whatever requirement of the day. So there's a
Well, in the narrowest of answers, again, this you're talking about philosophical topics that could literally take hours of discussion. But in the narrowest topic, narrowest possible definition, nationality is basically an expansion of tribalism. Me and the people like me want a place where we can live with our own values, with our own opinions, create a nation that will defend us and our way of life and allow us to live the way we understand. So that's the basis of a nation. Now, what gives you the permission or the ability to tell others if they can or cannot come? Again, in the narrowest of senses, force and control. If you have enough force to defend your nation, if you have enough force to keep it, again, not violent necessarily, but if you have enough force to prevent others from taking it from you, then you get to dictate what happens with what you have. And as for beneficial immigration, you would look at the needs of your specific nation. What do you have in abundance? What is missing from the equation? What you can contribute to the world and what the world can contribute to you. You work out, much like you would in chemistry, something to balance out your formulas so that you have everything you need.
So how do you, okay, an example of Israel, right? Good question. How do you, in Israel, how's immigration controlled in Israel? Like who can immigrate to Israel? Do you have to be of Jewish origin? Can anybody of non-Jewish origin immigrate? Do you need particular set of skills? Like how does that work?
Well, as a general principle, Israel, because it was founded as the a refuge place for the Jewish people after the Holocaust. So we have a rule that anyone who is of Jewish heritage, at least 3 generations back, is automatically eligible unless accused of some horrible crime in their country of origin, and then we'll consider it. Other than that, if you're married to Israeli, if you're related to anyone who's currently living here and you can prove good cause that you would want to come here, we control immigration much like most countries control immigration. We don't want to be overrun on the one side, but we want to attract talent on the other. So you balance things out.
What about asylum seekers? Do you have people just walking across the border and claiming asylum in Israel?
We used to have a big problem with asylum seekers, especially from Africa, Sudan, Eritrea. We used to have a big problem with that because of the civil war in Sudan. So a lot of people fled across Egypt and came through the border to Israel. And what happened is the Egyptian cops used to shoot them when they were trying to cross the border into Israel, used to execute them. And we used to give them, those who survived, used to give them asylum here. But what we've done now is we've done 2 things. We've built a border fence across the entire border to prevent them from coming in on the one hand. And on the other hand, Israel is engaged in several economic programs to help people in Sudan to have a better quality of life so that you don't feel the need to come here anymore.
So you built like a mini Trump wall? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I was gonna.
Well, we didn't build a Trump wall. We built a fence with gates that we can open if we need. But now that they know that there's a barrier, they're less motivated to come. But again, if that was the only thing we did, they would still come. The other thing we did is make sure that their conditions where they now are improved so that they don't have the motivation to come.
Apparently, Elon Musk was at the Mexican border with the United States, and he was documenting what was going on himself, and he was live wiring it on Twitter with millions of people waiting for what he was going to say. And he was also a very strong proponent for what you just said, something that like stops them or makes it more difficult for people just to think that they can walk across the border. Myself, I'm a pro proper immigration. The walk across the border asylums, I'm not really for that. Like I said before, in Canada last year we brought in 1.15 million immigrants. They go through the normal channels, but we know that there's hundreds of thousands who just walk across claiming asylum. And also, what I heard the other day in Canada, it was quite something, is that the people who apply for a Canadian resident, in other words, permanent status to stay in Canada, there's a lot of people also who are declined for one reason or another. But 60% of the people who are declined do not leave. In other words, they're here illegally. And that's year after year after year. So when they say that the population now in Canada is a little over 40 million, I suspect that it's probably quite a bit higher than that.
Okay, my idea of control would be to set specific goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And specific professions and skills that you would want to bring into the economy and open the gates for those, but also not completely shut down everything else. You do need also a certain amount of randomness, a certain amount of people that you cannot assess what their contribution to the country would be. Some of the most random people that come into the country can later in life, or their children later in life, bring some very great things to the nation. You don't know that. You cannot predict it. So you have to leave room for asylum seekers and for just random people who need or want to come into your country. Just don't make it a stampede.
Here's a comedian in me. Is that random immigration? Is that a good example of that? We actually covered it in a previous show. There was a Ukrainian army soldier. He brought in a lot of immigrants fighting during World War II of Ukrainian origin, including 2,000 Waffen SS soldiers. Did he follow the same philosophy? Maybe in line, And now we have Christian Freeland, who is the daughter of Nazi propagandist, Goebbels equivalent in Ukraine and Poland, and now she's our finance minister. Is that the kind of immigration we want? Now, again, somebody actually after that show told us like, "Oh, you can't account for the fact that maybe how do you know?" Account for the sins of her grandfather and all that stuff. Well, she's a World Economic Forum's member, and not just a member, high-ranking administrator, and that's. And that's a non-democratic organization. This is not unelected body that dictates to the world governments. The governments of.
Actually, it doesn't. It does not. The World Economic Forum has no dictative power whatsoever.
They don't.
World
I agree.
Economic Forum,
But they got
then
people.
why dictates to the economies? It doesn't. The only thing that the World Economic Forum does is to get a lot of very rich people together, which, by the way, are not always correct. They have a lot of mistakes and misses in their predictions. They get a lot of rich people together in one room to discuss about what they think will be the future of world economics, what trends they predict, and then they give a report, let's call it free advice, unsolicited advice to the government. If you want to take it, take it. You don't want to take it, you don't have to take it. It's literally just a bunch of rich people expressing their opinion and then using their money to make it known wide and loud. But they don't have any power.
But Glenn is playing violin. The reason why I know the reason why he's playing violin is because actually what you just said is true in a way. But those people then they go back. They actually, why does Trudeau goes in there and he necessarily implements those ideas? Those are not his constituency ideas. Those are ideas of the rich people of the world, but not ideas of Canadians Canadians did not sign up for climate change agenda, World Economic Forum agenda. Canadians did not sign up for 15-minute cities.
Climate change pretty much like everybody else will.
Say it again.
I said Canadians are going to suffer from climate change pretty much like everybody else will. It's the interest of everybody on this planet to do something about it.
Well, I think a climate change could be a whole different show in itself. We here at the Alex S show take a position that climate definitely changes, but to what degree, and is that how much of that is human activity and how much of that control or affected by CO2, for example, which being pushed on us in terms of. By the way, does Israel? That's a good question, Unai. Does Israel has a carbon tax?
Israel does not have a carbon tax. What Israel is doing is, because we're in a very sunny area, as you can imagine, we have like 9 months of the year is summer here. We're moving very hard towards solar and wind energies. Our goal is to be energy neutral, carbon neutral by 2030.
But you don't have well, exactly, by 2030. So the Israel does implement Agenda 2030, right?
It's actually been like that a lot before the 2030 initiative was actually declared. We've been working at it for the last 30 some years. Like, they've started installing the first solar farms when I was a kid.
And I'm not against the alternative technologies in terms of clean energy technologies. I agree, but nowadays we're discovering but it's a whole different conversation in terms of what happens to all those windmills and solar panels, how they're recycled at the end of life. But let's get back to this immigration story. Glenn, I'm an immigrant. I get along with you. Do you think I contribute to the society in a positive way?
Well, of course, but we're all immigrants. We're not part of the originals,
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
We're all descendants of immigrants. I mean, we all live on the planet together. There's one world. There's one race called the human race, and we're all together. So, if you take the negative agendas of government and the world strongmen, the controllers of the world, if you eliminate them and you just ask the actual people, not the people in government, but the constituency, the people in every country, you ask them, do you want to go to war? Do you want to go to war against the Russians? What do you want to go to war? For Ukraine? Do you want it this? Do you want? Most people are going to say no. They're fed up with it. Like they don't want any part of that. Nobody wants to send their offspring to a war, and nobody wants a war. So all this. These are agendas, and there's a few people who make big money off of conflict. A lot of the conflict is engineered purposely for that reason. Just ask the central bankers of the world. Probably they're not going to tell you the truth, but they'll look at you with a straight face, knowing that you do know the truth, and maybe they're going to try and give you a job offer later on.
Okay, so segue back to Yanai. Yanai, we just brought up a whole bunch of issues, and you and me can go specifically. We're not necessarily seeing it the same way, but for good reason, because we have different life experiences. I live on a different side of the world. It's really cold in Canada. I wish I was where you are right now. And although the weather is really nice right now in Montreal. The question is, like, all those issues that I just brought up at this show. Those are big global issues, but sometimes on a macro level, right, or micro level, even there is a way to vet the information, to understand the source of information and where information is coming from. So basically, how do you fact check information yourself? Because there's a lot of, let's say you go on a website and you're looking for a product, or you see it on social media, and there's a raging review about this, and you sign up for this product or you buy this product. When you get it, it's total, BS. It's faulty. It's not it's misrepresented. It's not what you sign up for. It's not the way it was represented to you. Or opposite, when you go sometimes on a company website to read a review about the company, if you're about to buy a service or product, and you get some negative reviews, how do you know this person wasn't emotional? How do you know it wasn't some sort of competitor or some kind of hater, leaving this kind of comment? I'm asking you that because you're sort of on the other side of the spectrum, and specifically on the other side of the world. How do you vet, this kind of information?
Well, that's a very good question, Alex. Actually, in international trade, as much as in politics, there are many different companies, politicians, factors that are interested in selling inaccuracies, exaggerations, and half truths in order to peddle a narrative or promote a product or suppress a product that's or greater than the one that they're selling. So there is a lot of problem with facts, especially these days where pretty much everyone can just grab their Twitter or their Facebook and just blurt out a lie and go proof that it's true or not. So there are actually a couple of ways of finding out the truth, but it requires a little bit more active involvement from the consumer of information. First of all, don't just rely on one post or one review by one guy, even if it absolutely fits your own opinion or what you think about it. Look at multiple reviews on different sites, not on the same site, different sites. If something seems too perfect or too terrible, it's probably not true. There are very rare cases where something is an extreme. It's worth digging deeper if you see everybody cussing at something or everybody praising something. Also, if you have a lot of bad reviews, but all of them concentrated on a relatively short period of time, like 1 or 2 or 3 days, that's usually a sign of a smear campaign. A company or a political group is targeting something specifically, and for the 2 or 3 or 4 days that that it takes the enthusiasm to subside or the campaign to die out, you're going to get a lot of bad reviews, but they're all in a very short amount of time. So that is a good indication that they're not organically generated. They're being pushed or promoted by somehow. So those are usually good indicators.
I have a friend here in our organization. His name is Val. Val, if you're watching the show, I'm putting you on the spot, Val. Val is really known for realistic reviews about terrible services that he receives. He's very enthusiastic in terms of living those to keep people accountable, to keep the services up. And it's almost comical the way, with meticulous, nature that he lives it. The thing is, most of the time now, you can click on the person's name, let's say if it's a Google review, and you can read other reviews for the different products they left and that person left. So I think in terms of that, if it's sort of kind of Google review, for example, you can see if this person organization left other kinds of reviews for other products and services, or if they have a history of leaving sort of those reviews, and that also can give you an idea if you're dealing with a fake review or the real review, right? What other techniques can you use, like to make sure that the information that you're getting is correct and not somebody's emotional outburst?
Well, first of all, it's like you said, there are a lot of fake bots and single-use profiles out there that people just open to leave a bad review and then just walk away. So it's true. First, what you have to do, you have to actually try to look at this person. Did he leave other reviews on other sites or even on the same site? Is this a recurring visitor, or is it just a one-time leave a review and disappear forever, which is a very suspicious thing, because as you pointed out, humans don't do that. That's not normal human behavior. When we have opinions, usually we express them. So people who leave one review usually leave 7. They don't leave 1. So you'll see them repeating a lot of different products, a lot of different situations. Also, you'll see usually very scandalous claims, very outrageous claims that help connect on an emotional level. They'll use charged words. They won't say, oh, this is a bad service or a bad product and I'm not happy with it. They're going to use very powerful words to trigger emotions. They're going to say, they scammed me, or they stole from me, or they ripped me up. They're not going to, just like soap operas, they're not going to say, I love you. They're going to say, my life belongs to you. They're going to exaggerate the language to a point where to trigger an emotional reaction in you. So anyone who's using highly hyperbolic language is somebody to suspect, is somebody to look at. So they're going to try to trigger your instincts rather than your rational thinking. So analyze their writing style, analyze their view on social media. Look for suspicious kind of behavior. Look for lack of details on the one hand and a lot of emotionally charged language on the other hand. And that gives you an idea if the review is fake or real.
That's a good way. Glenn, actually, that's a good way to segue to you, like in terms of people's emotions and how a lot of the information played right now to people's fears, and they've been, fear mongered, right? That's by the way, the definition of the word monger, right? It's like a salesperson, right? So fear mongering, they're selling fear, right? And they play into people's emotions. Glenn, does legacy media or any other media right now sells anything other than?
Yeah, that's just the matrix. Also, that when you read online about something negative, people usually don't give positive customer positive acclamations for something that are good. Some people do. But overwhelmingly, when something is good, people just expect it. That's the norm. But when something is not so good, then you get everybody lighting up and writing all negative reviews about it. So you have to remember that it's almost normal for, if you have one positive review, a lot of times you're going to have 10 negative reviews. So you know, a lot of those star ratings, you got to take that with a grain of salt, because naturally people prefer to complain about every little thing. They don't want to give a positive response to a good experience.
Well, personally, when I read the star reviews, for example, if I'm about to buy a product, the first reviews that I read, I don't read the 5-star reviews because it's also like, I had businesses, I had where I ask my friends and family to leave 5-star reviews. So I usually disregard those as my first to go to. I read the negative reviews, 1 star, 2 stars, and see what people complaining about. That's just my nature. I don't know if it's human nature in general, but this is what I usually do. Is it correct? No. And then, after I read the negative reviews, I see, well, that's just maybe a person had a bad experience. And then I go to reading the positive reviews. But what I urge the listener, like what Yanai is saying is, when you're doing, you got to be sort of a detective. You got to search and do research yourself on all the information. Like when we prepare for the show here at Alex Ash Show, I don't go just to one source. I pull up multiple sources from, from socials, from legacy media. And, we don't like CNN here. We don't like New York Post. We don't like, yet we still pull it up as a source of information because that's still a source and you can still get the information from it. It's how you discern that information. That's what is up to you. Yeah, Glenn, you want to say something?
No, I agree 100%. Well, you just said the legacy media. Yeah, you have to take that with a grain of salt and wash that down. But that's legitimate business. These are businesses that will stay around for a long time because they focus on customer satisfaction. So you're going to get repeat customers or positive feedback, and these loyal customers, are going to be the one who drive more people to your business, obviously. But today, let's say the business of government, the people running the government, they're horrible at it. They're all there for their own pocket, and that's I think it's AKA also known as monkey business. That's what's going on today, and that's why people have lost faith in their government. So when you go around looking for a business, look for a legitimate business. Call into that business, go online, read a lot about them, and then go really dwell into it deeper and see if that's the type of corporation you see yourself doing transaction with, good business with.
Mm-hmm. Yanai, would you immigrate to Canada if you had a chance?
I very much love Canada. I've been there a few times, as you well know. It's a beautiful country. And would I immigrate to it? Were I to be so inclined, I would not see it as a bad option, to be honest. I mean, I love where I am. I'm happy where I am. But if I were not happy where I am, Canada would definitely be a legitimate option in my eyes. But to say a little bit more, to expand a little bit more about what Glenn said, you're right that you have to, understand who you're dealing with. But here's another thing that you can actually do to get like a better hone on the situation. If you are not sure about a company, any company, call them, talk to the representatives, talk to them about the bad reviews that you see on their websites, give them a chance to, to respond to them. A company that's really like illegitimate or suspicious, they will be very defensive. They'll close down, or they'll send you off on your merry way because they can spend their time dealing with people who haven't read those reviews. A company that actually cares about their image will stay with you, try to explain the situation, bring you to evidence that refutes these reviews. So you can literally tell a lot about a company by the level of knowledge and the willingness to engage that the agents are showing you on the phone.
That's a good point, how they deal, so that your personal experience will dictate actually the validity of the statement. And by the way, most of the companies that do care, they usually reply to those bad reviews by saying like, "Oh, I'm so sorry about this experience. Oh, this is this is a smear campaign." Sometimes I heard this guy never came. I don't know who this guy is. So like the people that care about the reputation, they actually reply to those reviews. They have the whole team that does that. Unite, thank you so much for being on Alex Sass show again. This is incredible, all the way from Israel. We're not on the same continent. We're not necessarily on the same page in terms of our life philosophy, and that's okay. You're still our brother. We love you and respect you. and it's amazing. And I really like this immigration project. Project. I like this immigration subject, and just had an idea as we're doing this show. Maybe we'll cover more, like, because Canada is built on immigrants, and there's a lot of them here in Montreal. We'll probably bring some of them to the studio and do sort of a mini series and help people understand what immigrants actually contribute and how Canada actually helps them to do it in the proper good way. You know, when we're talking about like control immigration, what you brought up is, what does it mean, control immigration? Well, it's when we bring people that actually benefit from that, and we bring people who help the country benefit as well in many different ways. Because humans are still the greatest resource on this earth, in my opinion and my experience. So that's it for Alex Sass Show for today, brothers and sisters. And I thank you so much for being here. This is your Shabbat. How do I address that? Shabbat Shalom.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Shabbat Shalom to you as well. And it's always a pleasure to be on the show. And I'm always happy to hear Glenn tell me about the media elite and go a little cringy inside my heart.
But that's good. That's good. We're supposed to. We don't. If we all agree on the same subject, the world will be boring, wouldn't it be? And I think that's the true discussion.
If the Alex Sass Show does something to the world, is that it keeps it not boring.
Thank you, Yanai. And also, that's a sign of a man to be able to discuss various opinions and not get emotional about it, right? And like with a cold heart, with a cold head and a warm heart, to be accepting of other people's opinions. Because at the end of the day, we're all brothers and sisters, and we all share the same air, same water, and we want the same for each other. We want success, we want security, we want longevity, we want peace. And I wish you peace, Yanai, and I wish peace in the land of Israel. So good luck to you and your family, and brothers and sisters, we'll see you on the next one.